Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Keys to AWS Optimization, where today we're going to be talking all about observability with FinOps teams. So we're going to be looking at what is observability, why is it relevant to FinOps, and who else is it relevant to, along with, as we love to do, some demos. So we're going to be looking at a bunch of different things in the console that you can get access to straight away to get some insight into your applications and services and how they're performing so that you can make more educated decisions about scaling and whatnot with observability. But I have my lovely guest Helen with me. Helen, do you want to introduce yourself and do your kind of 1-minute origin story explaining who you are to folks?
Yeah, nice to be back. I'm Helen
Yes.
Ashton. I'm based in Canada, but I'm Scottish, so that's the weird accent thing. I've been working in observability for about 12 years, but I'm a physicist by training, and so I love data and anything to do with technology and doing things better, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am. I've been in AWS for about 5.5 years, and my role is all about supporting customers with their observability journey.
Amazing. And we've had someone in the comments that they're from Just Breaks, also in Canada. So people from all over. So yeah, keep those comments, questions coming throughout. If you're watching us live, welcome. Feel free to put any comments, questions in the chat where you are watching. Or if you are watching us on demand on YouTube, then make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, but also put any comments or questions underneath the video. I make sure to watch them and answer as much as we can. But let's get into the show good proper. So welcome to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Steph Gooch. I'm a senior SA advocate helping you on your FinOps journey. And I'm excited to dive into this topic because this year we're like trying to do more of this stuff. Me and Helen, we've known each other for ages. And I was like thinking about how observability is something that I think more FinOps people need to be engaged with. And I was like, I know the woman for the job. So let's kick off with a very broad and simple question like we like to do. What is observability?
Yeah, simple question to ask. So it's for many people, it's about understanding when my applications are broken, but it's a lot more than that. It's about understanding your application health, how people are using it, where the different flows are going, where your bottlenecks are. Like, really, it's about being able to answer the questions that you'd like to ask of your application. So, is everything working? If not, what's broken? Is it responding quickly enough? Where is it slow? Where might it be getting slow? Um,
Mhm.
is it working for the majority of our users, but there's a group of them that aren't working? Like, it's the answers to all of those questions, getting the right data so that you have that insight.
Interesting. And whose whose kind of responsibility is to make sure that you have good observability practices once you deploy something?
I mean, I love to say lots of people, but in reality, there's usually a team that's tied to either your infrastructure services or your application that are
Mhm.
responsible for it. But one of the problems with that is you get a very specific set of viewpoints. And I think we're going to go into shortly why observability is useful for many different people. And
Yeah.
so some observability requires your infrastructure team support or your developer support to get that data, but some doesn't. So some
Okay.
observability you can do even if you have no control over the application.
Interesting. And there's a lot of, and we'll do some of this in demo, there's a lot of stuff that's pre-built in, but some stuff, I think after we were talking about this, I started to have a bit more of a critical lens of applications that I've built, especially with things like Hero. And I was getting, or even things that we built a while ago by hand, old school, and noticing like, oh, it's not, why isn't this thing working anymore? And then a question of, how long has this not been working? And then
Hmm.
why didn't I know it wasn't working, like you were saying at the start? And it became me being like, oh, I actually need to have something to tell me this is broken. And as simple as things like I'm talking about alarms on CloudWatch, and we'll get to that kind of stuff later. But it really encourage you, especially if you're a FinOps practitioner, to also start to look at this data. But why do you think FinOps practitioners should be looking at this data?
Yeah, I mean, observability is a lot more than just application health and errors and fixing them. It's about usage patterns. This is where my physics background and my love of data comes in, because it's about being able to look at which parts of your application are being heavily used? Where's the profile of that changing? So do I have an area that's really struggling? Do I need to
Mhm.
look at resources in there? Do I need to change the infrastructure I'm using? Or hold on, over here, we're really not doing much over here and we're spec this like way through the roof. So can we save some money by changing our architecture decisions over there? And it's
Mhm.
also about looking at not just where are we now, but you said, how long has something been happening? So what's that profile? Is something changing where there's a slow, gradual increase in use that you need to start preparing for and think about the cost of that and the design implication choices of that? Are you designing for a low flow constant with a few spikes, different architectural decisions to support that at optimum cost? So those usage
Mm.
patterns really help you think about, well, this is what we thought would happen, but in reality, this is where we are. Does that change the decisions we make and the cost implications associated with that?
Interesting. Yeah, because some of this stuff you have to pay for. This is stuff because it costs a lot to, not a lot, but there's data and collection, and we need to have so much stuff to run these services. There is a fee, but then there's that argument of like, oh, do I need to pay for it? It's kind of, I think of it almost like insurance, maybe. That's how I might think of it. Like you're paying for this thing just in case, because maybe you made the most perfect application in the world and it's never going to break. Well done if you do that. Let us know how. Or send me an email if you think you've got the best application in the world. Let me know. But if or if you have things, but if it breaks, you need to make sure that you have an
Right.
awareness of that it's broken, but also why did it break, like you were saying. So we have this there, and also for improvements, like we want to see what capabilities we have. We think about cost with things like compute optimizer and stuff like that, as a lot of the data is backed by things like CloudWatch. And we also had a question, which is observability just CloudWatch?
Well, of course, that's what I support. So yes, but no.
Okay,
So
what else
there
is there?
are many, many brilliant tools out there, not from AWS, from other places too. And you pick the right tool for the job that you need to do. Observability it's a big area. And there are certain areas you're going to focus on. And very few people need everything. So you pick the right tool. But in AWS, we have kind of two sides to it. We have open source tools that we support, like Managed
Mhm.
Prometheus and Grafana. And then we have our native tools, which is around CloudWatch, and that's the area that I work in. But the important thing is your application is healthy, those usage patterns. And just to jump onto what you just said there about, if you've got the most perfect application, another benefit of having good observability is when you make a change, when you do something, how do you know that that's achieved what you were trying to, what your goal was? And one
Mhm.
of the ways you can often do that is with observability. I made it faster, I made it cheaper, I made it better, I reduced the errors, I made it more accessible, whatever, So again, a
Yeah.
lot of the time I've worked with people and showed them when they've introduced automation, here are the amount of automations that happen and how successful your initiative was at removing some manual
Ah.
work. So there's a
Yeah.
ton of different facets to this.
Yeah, it's almost, I guess, and it's funny. It's kind of like saying that FinOps is just cost optimization. Observability is just looking at things are broken. There's like more to this, and the more, and I'm sure FinOps people are sitting watching, like, yeah, this is. We don't just save money. We have so many more things where we're like managing these things. It's like, oh, okay, this is what observability is about. How do we make sure that we can see what is happening and track those improvements? For example, when we, in a similar kind of way of like when we move to Graviton, yes, there's a saving, but like how do we track the improvements in that process? And you'll see that through latency or like speed or whatever the thing is for it. I want to do a quick poll to the audience. um do you look at your CloudWatch dashboards? I'm just curious. So put 1 in the chat for yes and 2 in the chat for no. Drop those in. I want to see people actually spending some time looking at these kind of things. But when you speak to customers, do you often hear that like they're really on it and really checking these things, or not as much?
I think observability is an area that is still very much in its early days. It's not a discipline that we typically educate people with when they come through traditional education routes into IT. Many
Mhm.
companies don't have an observability team, so you don't have a
Right.
center of excellence to go and talk to. So I think there are pockets of really, really good practice out there, but there's an awful lot of people who are still going, what do I need to observe? I don't really
Mhm.
know what I need to do. How will it help me? And so a lot of
Mhm.
the conversations I have with people are about, where is your main focus and what are the different ways to get started without trying to do everything in one go and just drown in signals and, you know, trying to get something useful up front. I'm all about useful.
Yeah. We want to focus on making sure that the data that we have is useful. I think is a great goal for these. On that, a good kind of segue into the next question, which is, what are some simple ways people can get started? So before we go into who's using it, there's a few things that you wanted to suggest that people can just like go have a go at, having a look at.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about some of the different things that are kind of out of the box, but observability in the last few years has moved to a space where it's much easier to get started. A lot of things you can kind of get it to, I'm going to use a technical word, you can get it to auto instrument your application. So what I
Mhm.
mean by that is you click a button and say, I want you to learn about my application, and it will look at what's it talking to, and it will get basic details and let you see
Mhm.
without you having to go and change your code.
Mm.
One of my favorite ways of getting started is with synthetics, though. Synthetics or canaries. The idea of them, sad story. Do you know why synthetic canaries are called canaries?
I mean, is it like canary in the coal mine?
Yeah, totally, right? It's
Okay.
the sad story of we used to send a canary around to see if the coal mines had toxic gases in it. But it's the idea of, and yes, if the canary came back, things were good. You can work the rest out yourself. Um, but the idea of sending a test in to see how things are working. So synthetic canaries go down that line. And what you do is you essentially create like a fake user of your website. And you go and say, go and do this thing. And it might be just checking the page, it might be doing a search. If you've got an e-commerce site, it might be purchasing something. But you do these fake users and you get regular signals back going, hey, this thing you tested is working, this thing isn't. And for much of this,
Mm.
because you're using the front end of a web application, you
Yeah.
don't need to touch
You
the
don't need.
code. So
Yeah.
you can have business users, people outside of IT who need to know that an application's working can set those up themselves.
Mhm, mhm, and it needs to be, like you said, setting them up themselves. So we want to talk a little bit about, especially what FinOps people can do, but having that kind of outside remove thing, it's very similar. FinOps people that are watching will know about certain things where you can like remove these things, or even like think of it as, this is not exactly the same, but things like savings plans. You could buy a savings plan and make a saving without having any impact on the compute that you've chosen. So there's a similar kind of construct where it's like, what can we do that sits outside of that area? Any other suggestions for people to get started as well? And we'll go into more synthetics as a demo in a bit, but anything else?
Um, I think there's been a general trend. So I will start that statement again. When observability started, the only thing we really could do was collect data about our infrastructure. It's
Okay.
easy to do, it's kind of well known, but there's been a shift over the last few years to look at things from our user perspective, because ultimately you're designing that application for your user. So,
Mhm.
so things like synthetics or what we call real user monitoring or RUM that look from a customer perspective. Now, the only difference between RUM and synthetics is RUM is real customer data and synthetics is fake customer data. Super simple.
Okay.
But starting to look at things like what we call application performance monitoring and looking from the application perspective and what we call outside in rather than inside out or bottom up. So anything that kind of gives you, like, to me, the question I always ask two questions of people for getting started. The first one is when your boss comes and stands behind you and says, we've got to report the application is broken, what are the first three things you test? We should set up
Ah.
synthetics for those,
Okay.
right?
So like, as in, would it be like in the application itself? So like logging in and like doing a
Yep.
certain purchase, like putting, if you're e-commerce, as we always describe, is like putting something in your basket. Like, does that work? Things like that.
Right, totally. So say literally that someone goes, it's broken, and you go, I know what to check to say it's not broken. So let's
Mm.
automate those checks. Like you should never be blind on those key things. And it's a great way to get people when people ask, what should I observe? Well,
Mhm.
you actually know, you're just not thinking of it that way,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
the second question is from kind of the other side where people traditionally start is, what were your top 3 incidents in the last year? Which ones cost you
Oh.
the most money or the most pain or the most
Mm.
time to solve? Let's look at how you understand those patterns and catch those kind of patterns so that when those sorts of incidents occur again, you can get there much quicker. And they're 2
Yeah.
great ways to start thinking about what matters to me.
Yeah. And you could apply that to, I guess, any of the issues, whether that was kind of like an application suddenly not working, a security breach, a financial spike, asking those like that's a really good question of how to think about these things. Because if, for example, you said what was the biggest problem for spend in the last year, and you're like, ah, Jeff, I always use the name Jeff. I used to be Jeff's like Jeff, he spun up he had this account that spent like $1 million in a day or something. And you're like, okay, well, how was Jeff allowed to do that? And you kind of do almost the 5 whys, but those things. Whereas if another one is, oh, we had this kind of, we realized that we were oversizing things. It's like, okay, where's the base code for that? So
Right?
going that, I like that
Yeah.
idea. I'm going to bank that. Folks, I was about to say, let us know in the chat. What the biggest issue you've had in the last year? I don't have to show that. That's funny. We've got some comments. Before we do that, wait, no, we've got this one up. I'm a fan of Jeff. Maybe that's why our producer's called Jeff, and I've just always been like Jeff. That's very funny. Okay. Are synthetics automated, or can you set them up from your app?
Can I say yes to both of those?
Yeah.
Do we want to have a look at synthetics since we're going
Yeah,
down that route?
let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, right. Let me bring up your screen when you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, excuse me, I'm gonna look at my screen while we do this. Um, so I'm in the CloudWatch console here, and don't worry about reading the words because it's the concepts we're thinking about here. And I'm actually in the synthetic canaries console, and I have a number of synthetic canaries set up down here, this list that you can see. And you see some of them have passed and some of them have failed. And I've got this nice little visual view. I'm going to go and show you a really simple one, and then I'll answer that question using it.
Okay.
So I have what I call a heartbeat canary. Now,
Oh.
my canary comes with the ability to see screenshots, so I can show you exactly what it's checking. It's checking my
Oh,
beautiful little pet website. This is our demo
oh,
website for our workshop.
what a lovely demo website. I'm like,
Right?
what would
It's
you
so
make a demo
cute.
website of? I think. Oh my
You
God,
can
the
go in
dogs.
adopt pets. It's great. But a heartbeat basically goes and says, is this web page working? Okay, really
Okay.
simple, right? So what I can see in my synthetic is I can see what is returned back when I request that page. Okay.
Okay.
Now there's a ton of other information I can see. For developers, I'll give you a quick view at the geeky developer har file. Great way to see what things are taking a lot of loading effort.
Mhm.
But essentially what I'm doing here is I've given it a URL and I've said go and check it. Now I have a website here that is deliberately set up to fail. And so if
Okay.
I look at a failed one, and I was just clicking on that 0% success point, and I look at the screenshot for that, you see what the
Oh,
user would see.
right.
Um, Now, what's really nice about this doesn't have to be my application. The only thing I need to do this, there's a blueprint essentially when I go and set this up, couple of clicks, and the only thing I need is the website URL. And I can
Oh,
set
wow.
this to check on a frequency. Please don't set it too low because then you will bombard the website. Let's not do a denial of service attack with our synthetics. But let's say I check this once every 5 or 10 minutes. I'm
Okay.
going to get a baseline of data to know it works. I can
Mhm.
set an alarm off when that success hits that 0 point. And so I can get an automatic notification from that, or maybe carry out some automatic action as a result of it. And I can do this without touching, without knowing, without talking to the people that own that application. So if I had some external applications that I relied on, I could do checks on these too. So
So
really
if
easy.
application connected to someone else's, and
Yeah,
that's like, because otherwise, if someone's getting an error midway down the line, you'd be like, why isn't it everything's working? And it's like, but I rely on someone else. Interesting.
right. And most applications have something like that in there. There's a system that you
Mhm.
don't have control over. So if you want to get that first port of call, instead of calling 20 people people on the line to go, something's broken, isn't it nice if you can say, I know this is what's broken?
Yeah. Oh my
So
goodness, that's so
synthetics are
cool.
both automated, easy to set up, and there are lots of different kinds of synthetics you can do.
Okay.
So let me just, I will show you some of the ones that if I create one here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see. So blueprints is what a lot of people use. And in
Okay.
blueprints, there's my heartbeat monitor, single web page, just a URL, and then tell it how often to check. I can check APIs as well as web pages. I can
Mm.
check broken links. Go and check my page, check down how many levels, and tell me if any of the links are broken. I can build workflows. So these canary recorders and the workflow builders, a way of building workflows. So let's imagine I have this retail site. I could build a workflow that goes and searches for a product, adds it to
Mhm.
my cart, goes and fills in the address details, and then checks out to pay that. And I could have all of that in a single workflow that I have checked on a regular basis.
How and with that, so say let's use our fictional e-commerce site as or like the dog one example.
Yep.
So how does that work in terms of getting it to if you say like you're gonna I'm trying to think, does it when you give it the URL, does it go and figure out what input
How
is
to know
needed
what
to
to
move
do?
forward? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two ways. If you really know your stuff, you can use this workflow builder. But I love this Canary recorder. It's a Chrome plugin. And what I do is I start recording and I go and do what I want it to do. And it
Oh my
works
god,
out
that's
the
so
code for
cool.
me, right? Now, caveat, it is using the structure of your web pages behind the scenes to work out what you clicked on, where you entered information. So if your structure changes, you probably need to record that again. But you can go in and edit the code. So if you have someone who understands that structure, they can go
Mhm,
in and go,
mhm.
oh, actually, this is a better way to reference that button you pressed.
Yeah.
So having someone who knows some of that is useful, but you can just go and record it.
Yeah. That
Um,
is so clever in itself because
yeah.
doing that kind I know that we have things I've forgotten what the software's called, but you can like do screen record and then working backwards. But I love that you can just like plug that in because there's me being like, okay, so how would I find where I have to put the address in and like and that's just that okay, well I'm trying this
I want
out.
you to try
So
that. Yeah.
yeah.
Couple of other things you can do. You can do a visual monitoring check. Now, what
Okay.
this means is you can pick a portion of your page or exclude portions and say, this should always look the same. I want to know when it changes. So we might exclude the portions that show our login name or
Mhm.
today's date or something like that. But if you want to know, is my key front page information showing up in the right way, for example, or if you have multiple different people writing different parts of your website and you want to be able to check that they're consistent, that's a
Mhm.
great one to do. And you can actually see the changes. I don't have one set up to show you. Um, but beyond that, so those are like the easy ways in. You can just write your own code. So these use, for those who know the words, these use Selenium and Puppeteer coding frameworks. So you can actually just write your own code for it to go and run that. And the nice thing, if you talk to your QA team, often they use those frameworks. So they may well have a ton of things that they check in their QA process. And you know, if you check it in your QA process, why would you not want to check some of those things regularly about your actual operation? So you may well find there's some stuff already there that you can just pick up and use.
Yeah, and that was the Selenium was the thing I was thinking of. But yeah, there's already so it's like it works for all levels kind of thing. So folks, if
Yep,
you are like, hey,
totally.
if you want to give this a go, we've got a couple of questions. Let's hit
Mm.
those up. So how much is it? I'm assuming that's how much is Canaries.
So I'm really bad at remembering numbers, despite being a
Okay.
physicist. I do theory, not actual numbers. But the way that CloudWatch pricing works is like the way that most AWS works, is that it depends on how much you use. So
Okay.
for synthetics, there'll be a price for each synthetic that you run, for example. And if you
Oh,
store the
okay.
data in S3, there'll be a component for that. But essentially, the key thing there is to work out what are the pieces of functionality I'm interested in, and then you can have a look on the CloudWatch pricing page and see what does this translate for me.
Perfect. I've dropped the pricing page link in, so have a little look in
Awesome.
there. But yeah, everything is scalable with those things, and that's why a lot of, if we just put our like FinOps hat back on, a lot of cost optimization we find with CloudWatch specifically is people using it incorrectly or doing the thing where they've
Yes.
kind of set things up and then they've never tracked it, and they've kind of done it because I know I need to have observability, so I will go and put some logs in and I will set this thing
Right.
up and then have alarms, and then you'll look back and the alarms don't have enough data and the logs are useless and like all of these things.
Yeah.
So
And that's classic, right? Because
yeah.
typically, say people try to tick a box or they try to log everything. And, you know, a lot of my colleagues in this area will say, you know, you really should log trace metric, you know, get a lot of telemetry. I have a slightly different way of looking at it in that my theory is don't bring it in if you don't have an action. So
Ah,
if you don't have a decision point, if you haven't thought about how you're going to use that data and have a plan for either a manual or an automated action, then how are you going to cope with it and use it well? So I
yeah.
tend to work from that. So think about FinOps people are really used to thinking about resources, right? So
Mhm,
what do you have available to act on the data and which actions are important? And start with those.
mhm.
Now, that's
Yeah.
not to say that having a general set of data isn't useful because if you're troubleshooting, you don't know where the issues are going to occur. So there
Mhm,
is kind of a baseline of, you know, you kind of want to have some tracing in your application and things like that. But don't create alarms unless you have an action plan. Like you're
mhm,
just
mhm.
going to drown yourself.
Yeah, it's just noise in that you can't handle. A couple more questions. Can you create one or check, or can you create a canary or check based it on availability zones?
So remember I said that these canaries are based on checking something in a URL. So
Mhm.
because you don't have control over what's happening behind the scenes, then the answer to that one is no. But I think where you're coming from is that typically there are definitely some tools out there that let you say, my core application is here, and I want to check from here, is that other application working? So what we
Yeah.
could do in CloudWatch is you can do it regionally, but not from an availability zone. But I will say you shouldn't have your whole app in one availability zone. So region is actually a better choice anyway, because your app should be on multi-AZs.
Mhm. Good advice as always. Another one, which I love this one. Can I integrate Canaries with Bedrock Agent Core browser so I can write checks in natural language?
Oh, so we're all onto kind of some of the AI changes now. So I'm going to give you a general answer first. There's a lot of parts of CloudWatch which have natural language integrated into it. So, for example, if I'm writing a log query, I can actually say in natural language and it will write the log query for me. Okay. So there's a lot of areas like that where, you know, like everyone else, we're going, hey, there's some easier starting points here. Let's
Mhm,
use the way we talk to help us do that.
mhm.
Um, Agent Core, which is part of our AI platform, for those that don't know, there's actually a specific set of observability. I don't have a demo to show you, but it's focused on observability of Agent Core. And that's
Okay.
right in the CloudWatch console. And it looks at things like tokens and you can connect into evaluations and you know, that's probably deeper for another session, but you can observe your AI with an already out of the box experience with opinionated dashboards and stuff. As
Yeah.
question, can you integrate canaries? Well, do you have a front end or an API that you can use your canary to check? If so, then canaries are the right place for you. If
Mhm,
not, then maybe you need another kind of automation. It's really what's your access point.
mhm, mhm.
But
Interesting. Hope
right
that's
now, you can't do natural language and have it create the canary for you, but it's also super simple.
yeah. But I mean, these are, I mean, and I wonder, I'm assuming that there's an API for Canaries. So, and you can probably deploy them through that. So I'm sure you could, if you wanted to use something like Hero to
Well,
ask
there's
it
an
to do.
MCP server for CloudWatch. There are
Oh,
several. I
okay.
believe there's one for application signals and one for CloudWatch itself. So if you know what MCP servers are and you're using those, go and have a look at the ones that AWS gives out for that. And yeah, this is the thing now, right? There's so many different approaches. You could have Kiro write your infrastructure as code to deploy your canary.
Yeah.
So, yes.
There's a version. Yeah. Brilliant. And okay, next question. Thoughts on streaming versus polling for CloudWatch metrics?
So I believe what the questioner is asking about is how we bring metrics in or how we bring metrics out. Both of them could be a case. So if we're talking about data coming into CloudWatch,
Mhm.
AWS services supply what we call vended metrics. So those are things that our service teams go, hey, you're using EC2, you should have these metrics. And they're out of the box, freely sent into CloudWatch, and you can go and use them.
Mhm.
Beyond that, for ingestion, there are things we call agents or collectors. And there are CloudWatch agents, there are open telemetry agents, so open source standards, and various other collectors that you can use to get data from your source into CloudWatch. Some of them will use different mechanisms, but primarily what they're doing is essentially streaming that data in. But the collectors worry about connecting to CloudWatch. So from an ingest side, you don't have to worry about it too much. If you want to take your data out of CloudWatch, then, and often this is people using third-party systems, then
Mhm.
typically that third-party tool will dictate whether it's streaming or polling. If you're writing your own or it's another use case, then you really need to think about how quickly do I need that data? And is it a pull or push mechanism that's going to work better for me on that? So it's very use case dependent. I'm trying
Mhm.
to answer this in kind of all the different ways. But if the questioner has more details in there, they can
Yeah.
share that back with us. But that's kind of the
Feel
general setup.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, two more questions. Are CloudWatch agents like AI agents? I think from what you were just saying.
Um,
As
Our cloud, so agents mean
the
so
word
many things
agent.
now, right? So the agents I mentioned, let's change and use the word collectors for those right now.
Okay.
Those are not AI agents. Those are little applications that run on your resources that go and grab data and send them into CloudWatch. There's no AI needed. It has a very
Okay.
fixed function. However, there are AI agents associated with CloudWatch. So we've already mentioned MCP servers.
Hmm.
That's one way you can use AI. Do we want to go into AI investigations right now?
Hmm.
Should
I
we touch
mean,
that?
yeah, yeah, I'll save the other question for after. So yeah, let's go
Okay.
into it. Let's go into AI agents.
So everywhere is using AI for everything, right? So no exception. So within CloudWatch and within AWS Observability, there's a number of different areas that are looking at how do we use AI to help us understand what's going on with our system. So there are two that are relevant to observability in AWS. One is called CloudWatch Investigations, and one is called DevOps Agent. At a high level, I'm going to talk about them at a high level. At a high level, they're essentially the same thing. Help me understand what's wrong with my system. And they will go and find what it thinks is related data, and they'll come back to you and say, hey, there's this, and I'm going to go and check this. And they'll come up with a conclusion about what they think is happening. And with these, typically you can say this is relevant, this isn't, or go and look over here. But essentially, they go and come up with an investigation for you and a resolution that says, while you've been waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and logging into your laptop, I've already found all this for you. And here's what I think the problem is. And this is going to
Right.
change, like AI is changing everyone's world. This is going to change both the access point into observability, the skills you
Mm-hmm.
need to understand and resolve incidents, but
Mm-hmm.
also it's going to change how we understand what our actions are afterwards, how we understand patterns across them, how we automate
Mm.
solutions. So I think we're right at the very beginning of that world. And I'm super excited about what's to come, about how that can really help us build more robust systems by understanding where our incidents occur.
Yeah, and it's interesting this idea that you made me think of lowering that, like you said, lowering that kind of a barrier to entry for learning about like what happened with the application and stuff like that. So many of these jobs, like these technical jobs, we're lowering that barrier. Whereas today I was saying I was building a little app to help me come up with the lovely titles of these episodes, and I was like, it's got a nice little it's got a website, and I go to it, and I even made a little like icon thing, and I was just really excited because I was like, oh my god, I've made like this thing. And it was one of those moments where you're like, wow, it's made so much code to do that. Like there's so many files and I don't know what any of them say. And before I could never have done this. And it's like I've made applications before, but it would be like so painful for me to do it over
Yeah.
so much time. And it's really lowering that barrier for people to try things. Now, with that, I will caveat I've had to go, and we were just talking, I think, before we started streaming. I was like, oh, this application needs guardrails because I'm using Bedrock, and I don't want people to. I've done my essay associate exam and my Gen AI associate exam, and I know I need prompt injections and guardrails, and I need to go make sure I do those kind of things. And even on this call just before, I was like, oh my god, did I put observability in because I gave it a steering file that I've written about observability, but I'm like, did it do it? I need to go check, and security and these things. So yes, we're lowering the barrier for entry, but we still need to have expertise around it. So I still encourage everyone to keep watching these videos and keep learning and like understanding the risks about it.
Totally. Like to me, and this is a much bigger conversation, you know, and not specific to observability, but to me, what AI lets us do is get to the point where we can judge if we have the thing we want quicker. If I want to do something in a certain way, I need to have experience to know how to ask that and how to check that. Because, you know, I have to talk to my AI like it's a petulant teenager because it doesn't listen to me. I'm sure everyone else does too. So like for helping our general workflow for individual things, or do POCs or things where how it built them doesn't matter, then AI is awesome, super powerful. But where, like you say, there are guardrails, there are reasons for doing infrastructure choices, there are reasons for doing your architecture choices. There are things you need to have in place, whether it's for your FinOps perspective, your compliance perspective, your interoperability, then it helps you get there quicker, but you still need that expertise. And observability is no different. You know, it's great that you can go and ask it all of these things, but if it gives you a resolution and you just blindly apply a solution, not necessarily the smartest thing in the world. You have to understand the impact of that and how that relates to your application. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like, it's awesome. It's making so many things less tedious, but you still need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah. And that is where people like, if you watch my other show, How to Build with AWS, that I do on Mondays, where we talk about prototypes and customer stories. That conversation is kind of like, we've spoken about internally, like how does this prototyping team get affected by things like AI being able to spin up a product in a few hours, and people, and that kind of conversation. And then you realize, yes, I can spin a product, but I'm going to be honest with you folks, the app I made is slow. Like you could not take that to an actual production application because it does not deal with load very well. And
but your observability would help you know exactly where that problem is.
Exactly. Let's bring it back. So yeah, there's all these exciting things with AI, and we do encourage you to go, and we're not going to dive into investigations today, but have a little look, because all these things are there and they often have a free tier attached to them. Again, check that pricing page I shared earlier, but go and like have a look and ask some questions, especially if anything's errored recently, and see what it comes up with, or improvements, or just ask anything you feel like. There's often in these situations it suggests some things as well, so that you can actually go and see like, what would I use this for? Maybe you'd unearth something, especially if you ever have downtime. I feel like people do this, but like you have some downtime, like what do I do now? And I'm always like, I need a new kind of project. You're like, well, why don't I have a look at my historical stuff and also see how you can optimize. We're just we're way over halfway, but any other questions, comments, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We have another question. When should you use third party over AWS native? So I'm guessing like CloudWatch versus any of the third party. Is there any? I mean, we love our partners. Number one, always
totally,
we love
totally.
our partners. But is there anything kind of getting started that you recommend?
Do you know, all of the third parties and the AWS tools, they typically work multi-cloud, they typically work on-prem as well. There's very little really obvious distinction between them at a high level. Obviously, AWS tools integrate a little better with AWS, right? Because it's our environment, you know. But the guidance I would give is, it's a bit like you've learned Python and you say, what should I go and code? Well, what do you care about? Right?
Mm.
We can write anything, and observability is so huge. We could look from infrastructure, we could look from application, we could look from end user, we could look from business, we could look from cost. Where are the areas that you really want to be able to answer some questions and take some actions? And
Mhm.
then what functionality do you need to take those actions? And where is the best price point and usability that gives you that? There will be
Mm.
different answers. There is no, this is the best tool for everything. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, the other thing to bear in mind is all of these tools change all the time and have new functions and features. So it is really hard for the end user to go, what's going to work for me for 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
Do you know, one of the
Mhm.
biggest key things and changes in the industry is this idea of using open telemetry for your collectors. Now, the
Great.
purpose of this is that you have one collector that can send to different endpoints, different tools. So
Mhm.
if you do want to change your tool, you don't have to change all your tooling because it's still the
Ah.
same open telemetry collector. And the majority of observability tools will work with those open telemetry collectors. Slightly
Okay.
higher starting point to get the right information in, because it's not just out of the box for, say, AWS or whatever, but not a
Mhm.
huge barrier. And I think very much worth it in the long term to future proof. Because to me, that's the really,
Yeah.
really hard bit. If I have to go and update my collectors on every single
Mm.
resource I have because
Yeah.
we need to use another tool, like I don't wish that
I
on
don't want
anybody. I've
to.
done it
And then you'll
before.
have tech debt. Yeah, you'll have tech debt because you'll be like, okay, well, we'll do that thing. New applications, we'll do the new one. Old
Yeah.
applications we'll leave there, and then you have this mishmash, and new people never know where to do it. Okay, 2 questions, and I think we can answer one of these with one of the resources you have, and then we'll go back to a little bit more demo before we finish up. So, broader question: what does good look like when I'm thinking about observability?
Oh, that's a really good question. For me, it's about answering those questions that I pitched earlier. So when someone comes and says to me, the system's broken, I know what's broken. I know
Hmm.
what my throughput is. I know where my key functionality behavior is. I have this confidence that the main things I care about are working without me having to check anything.
Hmm.
The other side of that is typically that incident side. And I would say good there looks like getting alerts and information that direct you to the right people to investigate further. I feel like the biggest, my experience of doing this, before AWS, I worked in companies running observability practices.
Hmm.
And my experience there is that the most frustrating part is getting like 40, 50 people on a call in the middle of the night, and they don't even know who you need to talk to. I
Mm.
think good there right now looks like, here are the 3 people I actually need help from, and
Hmm.
giving them that data, not just to see what's wrong, but to see when it's fixed. I have a
Amazing.
memory of sitting at a party, because it was a very important party I wasn't gonna miss, and one of my teams was trying to fix an issue, and I'm sitting there watching the observability to tell them when it's changed, when it's getting better.
Ah,
And I
interesting.
could do that from my phone at this party with a drink in my hand
Ah.
because all the observability was there for me to see the functionality behavior.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
not
yeah,
just when it's broken, but when it's being fixed is important too.
yeah. Yeah.
And
Getting to
everyone will then evolve, you know, and you'll
mhm,
grow
mhm.
and you'll
Yeah.
suddenly get more automation in, and then you'll get more optimization practices, and but key, do you know it's working, and do you know when it's being fixed and where it's broken?
Yeah, and finding out the data, and like you said, the people, even though we have all this agentic stuff now, people are still responsible for a lot of these applications, and to hit the button of go, we still need those people in a room, and having those conversations is crucial. Right, so we have about 10 minutes left. I don't know if we wanted to touch on another one of the demos, that you had. Oh, did I lose Helen? Or is it
I
me?
just lost you momentarily.
I
I'm
think
back.
that I think I lost you as well. You're back.
Can you say that again?
So, yes, pleasure. Would you want to do another quick demo before we finish up of one of the services?
Yeah. Why don't we have a look at some of the kind of out of the box things just to give an idea of the
Yeah.
different kind of observability that's kind of there and easy to get
Yeah. What's
started?
available? Give some people
Um,
some things to go and have a
okay,
look at.
so yeah, so let's start off with the sort of bottom end, the more infrastructure end. I've said
Mhm.
there's kind of these vendor metrics that come in, and you can build your own dashboards and set your own alarms, and we're not going to go into that today. But some of the out of the box experiences that are there for specialist areas, I think are worth just like bringing to people's attention.
Mhm.
This is Container Insights. I don't have a big setup here. 3 containers is not a very big workload, but it works for ECS and EKS. I'm going to drill down into my EKS. The purpose of these specialist views is that we kind of know what people who look after containers want to see. So these are out of
Mhm.
the box dashboards. We can see some information on the front page, but we can also
Mhm.
drill down into our clusters. And you'll see on the left-hand side, we've got all the different levels within your
Ah.
container environment that I can go and look at. And for each of those levels, there are out of the box metrics, dashboards, data for you to see to help you understand the health or any issues. So this is super helpful for people getting started. Um,
Yeah.
it links into, we'll look at various other tools that links into like application signals. Um, but you can then use the data that's there. If you want to build any custom dashboards, you can totally go and
Mhm.
do that. So
Ah.
containers is one area. There's a specialist tool. Databases is another. If
Mhm.
I go and have a quick look at my very small database setup, there's all sorts of things I can see here. For example, I can see my top SQL queries here. I can see what wait time there is on each of my SQL queries. So going and
Mhm.
finding which ones are slow and doing something about it. Um, I can go and have a look. These dotted lines, by the way, are kind of recommended thresholds, but I can go
Okay.
and pick each of these queries and see when did they occur.
Mm.
I can look at them all together, but my threshold is so low on this unrealistic application that you can't see the rest of the data. So there's a ton of different drop downs and different sets of data that we can go and explore within our database experience that's all out
Mhm.
of the box. And in many cases for containers and databases, it's literally ticking a box to say, I want this turned on.
Mhm.
Um, then I said, we kind of move up from infrastructure to application.
Okay.
So we can see maps
Oh, wow.
that it has built for us of our application. Do not try and read the details. But this is one
Do not worry.
example of the map of that pet site that I showed you.
Ah, okay.
And you can see different services, and I can drill down into these and I can have a look at related data. I can go and have a look at more detailed data too. Now we're going into application performance monitoring or APM,
Mhm.
where I look at my services, at my application, and I see data on how this is performing. Um, let's pick something a little more exciting than that one. But I start to see, again, this is my test app. So, I start to see some of these key signals that we often call golden metrics or red metrics, which are
Okay.
requests, errors, and duration or latency. These are fantastically powerful metrics. I'll tell you why. If I know the number of requests, I know how busy my app is.
Mhm.
If I know the number of errors, I know how many problems are occurring. And because I know how busy my app is, I can start to decide on priority and urgency of any issues that are
Mm.
happening.
Okay.
Same when I look at latency. If things are slow, are they slow because and there's only a few people on? Well, that's probably an application issue. Are they slow because
Mhm.
there's lots of people on? Might be a load issue, but it's more urgent because more people are affected. So these kind of base metrics are really useful for getting a lot of insight into what's going on. Um, and then we get different kind of trace maps as we look even deeper. Like one of our key types of data is traces. And traces are cool because this is one action through my pet site. Okay. And I can see every part of the flow of this action in my trace. I can see that I started off on an application on an EC2 instance, and then I went to a service on ECS, and then I went to DynamoDB, to my database. And in each of these, there is information related to that particular part of the request. So I can get really high and I can get super deep. And now I've
Amazing.
overwhelmed you with a ton of stuff, but there's a ton of these out of the box experiences, and it's so much easier to get that data in than it used to be.
Yeah. And there's like some questions, there's a bunch of questions. If we don't have time for questions, I'm so sorry. Please feel free to, if you watch us on YouTube or if you go to events for YouTube, you can just give it a beat after we end the show. And then there's the comments box underneath it. You can drop any comments in there and I will get back to you. When you say these are out of the box, like they're just there, right? By default, I don't need to go, I just need to enable them and then they're just there.
Yeah, you have to enable them because there's both a cost to them and there's that decision about whether you want that data to be collected. So those are both in your hands. But everything I have showed you today, I don't have to build a dashboard to show. Those dashboards and the connections between them are part of the feature.
Yeah, and you can extract those bits and make your own like dashboard where you combine these things, which is one of the
totally.
Excellent. Okay, so 2 more minutes. I want to pull up one of the questions. We answered that one. Okay, this one we can have maybe a short answer for. How much faster would you say that teams can resolve issues or with a proper, quote unquote, proper observability, again, like all the stuff we've spoken about, versus before when they're just using kind of basic CloudWatch of this setup? So maybe more about if they have a dedicated people that have set up the time and understand their application, how much faster do you think it is to solve problems?
I mean, how long is a piece of string? But, you hear a lot of stories about, 60, 70% reduction in resolution time.
Wow.
I mean, these are from our customers telling us about these things. I think when you have poor observability, you don't even know you've got issues to solve. So a lot of people don't have the data to make that measure because they didn't even know it was broken or slow. So it can be really tricky for customers to give that story afterwards because they don't have the data to make that decision. But I certainly think that your health, your awareness, and your ability to make good future decisions didn't exist before you had good observability. How do I decide which bottleneck to address if I don't know where my bottlenecks are?
That's just funny. Exactly, and you need to kind of have the time with that data. Okay, so we had a question here which I will take. So how do you help customers develop observability? The word is hard to say, observability strategy when they don't know where to start. So let me share my screen. We have skill builder training. You're going to see me showing a lot of these. We love a skill builder course. Check this out. I think Jason also has some workshops he'll set his links to in the chat now, which would be great. So a bunch of resources to get you started. But yeah, any quick tips for people to just get started is probably just have a look, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into some of the details, we have an AWS best practices guide, which is a combination of, all the people like me that spend time working with customers, kind of collected a lot of those experiences. So you can shortcut a lot of the pain. And I think Jason's going to share that. And then if you want some hands-on, we have what's called the One Observability Workshop. Do not start this workshop and decide you're going all the way through it. It's big, but pick parts that relate to where you want to focus. And in there, there's both open source and native, which is CloudWatch. But in general, I would go back to what we talked about right at the beginning. You cannot make decisions on what you cannot see, whether that's cost decisions, bottlenecks, design decisions, or fixing issues. So start where you're feeling the pain. Start where you think that the data can help add value and either save you time or improve your processes. And I know everyone wants to do everything and get a single pane of glass and, be fully observed, but work on something that makes a difference and then work out where your next priority is. And it's okay that your direction is different from other companies around you. This is a personal decision about what pain you're feeling, about what actions you want to take.
Yeah, the getting, I think a big advocate of, and how we always want to be on this show, is starting out with something that actually means something and helps you solve a problem. Here's the observability best practices guide that was just mentioned. Oh, there's an event. Register for the event.
We do
have a look at
lots of different events that you can just sign up for free and watch. Like my colleagues in the worldwide team do a ton of them. It's brilliant.
Oh, nice. Well, there you go. Challenge for everyone. And with that, let me do some last little housekeeping bits. So as a reminder, if you have not already, join the Customer Acceleration Team LinkedIn group. This is a great place to see all the content we publish and different resources and when we're doing shows and stuff like that. So please go and join there. Go on to Build a Center, get yourself an account and make sure that you follow me. You can look for my alias. I publish a summary post of all the episodes we do and write different articles, and you can see things like my other show, How to Build with AWS, which is amazing, and I love doing that show as well. And with that, that has been it. Then thank you so much. The time has flown. I can't wait to go and play with the Canary tool. That is going to be my homework to go and do. Let me know if you go and have a look and play with the Canary tool as well. Drop me an email, costoptimization@amazon.com, with something fun that you've learned. Or, like I said, grab us on YouTube, share this, watch this, share this with other people, share the channel. But drop any comments, questions, or let us know what you get up to under there. And with that, I will say goodbye, and I will see you all next week. Thanks.